My name is Amara Okafor, and the worst decision of my life started with a spreadsheet. Not a dramatic confession. Not a romantic moment. Not a kiss. A spreadsheet. At 28, I worked as executive assistant to Ji-hoon Kong, CEO of Kong Holdings. Which sounds impressive until you realize it mostly involved preventing disasters created by a billionaire who believed sleep was optional and patience was for weaker people. Ji-hoon was brilliant. The kind of man who could walk into a board meeting, destroy 6 bad ideas in under 3 minutes, then accidentally create 12 new problems before lunch. Working for him was exhausting. Being attracted to him was worse. Not that I was attracted to him. I wasn't. Probably. But my point is, I had successfully survived 3 years without crossing any professional boundaries. Then everything went wrong on a Tuesday. I was reviewing quarterly reports when Ji-hoon walked into my office, closed the door, and sat down. Immediately, I became suspicious. CEOs only close doors for 3 reasons. You're getting promoted. You're getting fired. Or somebody is about to create a problem. Knowing Ji-hoon, I prepared for option 3. Amara. That tone worries me. It should. Wonderful. He slid a document across my desk. I looked down, then blinked almost 10 times in 10 seconds. Because the title read, Girlfriend Agreement. I looked at the document, then at him, then back at the document. No, you haven't read it. I don't need to. At least look. I refuse. Amara. Ji-hoon. We stared at each other. Finally, I opened the document. That was my second mistake. Because the first page contained a table of contents. A table of contents. For a fake relationship. The man had created sections, subsections, appendices. There were footnotes. Actual footnotes. I laughed so hard I nearly fell out of my chair. Ji-hoon looked offended, which somehow made it funnier. You made a relationship manual. It's organized. You made a fake dating handbook. It's practical. You included page numbers. He folded his arms. I like being prepared. I stared at him. You're insane. That isn't a no. Unfortunately, he was right. Because curiosity is one of my character flaws. A serious one. I flipped through the pages. Family profiles. Wedding schedules. Relationship history. Favorite foods. Childhood memories. Everything completely fabricated. This man had built an entire fictional romance. You spent weeks on this. 3 weekends. I covered my face. Why? For the first time, his confidence cracked. Just slightly. Then he sighed. My grandmother. That got my attention. Everybody fears Mrs. Kong. Including Ji-hoon. What about her? He leaned back. Then delivered the sentence that changed everything. My grandmother says if I show up to my cousin's wedding single again. He paused briefly. She's transferring my voting shares to my cousin. I stared. He stared back. Finally, I said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I know. Your family is ridiculous. I know. You're asking me to help you commit relationship fraud. It's not fraud. It is literally romance fraud. It's temporary. I laughed. Then I noticed something strange. Ji-hoon looked nervous. I'd never seen that before. Not during mergers, lawsuits, or shareholder revolts. Yet somehow his grandmother had accomplished what multinational corporations couldn't. I should have said no. A sensible woman would have said no. Unfortunately, sensible women don't have student loans. 3 days later, I was sitting beside my CEO on a flight to Busan pretending to be the love of his life. And I had absolutely no idea that before the wedding ended, his grandmother would look at my face, drop a teacup, and ask a question that would change both our lives forever. Where did you get that necklace? The flight to Busan lasted 53 minutes. Long enough for me to discover 2 important things. First, Ji-hoon took fake dating disturbingly seriously. Second, I was wildly unprepared. What's my favorite color? I looked up from my phone. What? He sighed. The handbook. You made a handbook. Answer the question. I thought for a moment. Blue. No. Green. No. Do I look like someone who cares about your favorite color? You should. I stared at him. You're paying me. Exactly. I wanted to throw something at him. Instead, I opened the handbook. Page 12. Favorite color. Black. Of course it was. Only Ji-hoon would choose a color that sounded like a corporate acquisition. By the time we landed, I'd memorized fake anniversaries, imaginary vacation stories, and an entirely fictional first date involving coffee. The scary part? The fake first date was better than any real date I'd ever been on. I decided not to think about that. The resort was beautiful. The kind of beautiful that makes you wonder if rich people experience reality differently. Gardens, ocean views, luxury villas, enough flowers to start a small ecosystem. The wedding wasn't until the following day, but the family had already arrived, which meant introductions. And introductions meant danger. Ji-hoon squeezed my hand. A small gesture. Natural. Convincing. Unfortunately, my heart immediately betrayed me. Professional boundaries were becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Relax. I'm relaxed. You look like you're about to testify in court. I like my life before this. His smile appeared briefly, then disappeared as we entered the main reception hall. People turned. Immediately. Every head, every eye, every terrifyingly attractive member of the Kong family. I suddenly understood why celebrities hated public attention. An older woman approached first. Elegant. Perfectly dressed. Dangerously observant. Ji-hoon. Aunt Sun-hee. Her eyes immediately moved to me, then narrowed. Not hostile. Like a customs officer deciding whether I belonged to the country. And this must be the girlfriend. The way she said girlfriend made it sound fictional, which technically it was. I smiled. Professional. Polite. Terrified. Amara. Her gaze dropped. Toward my neck. Then paused. A strange expression crossed her face. Confusion. Recognition. Then it vanished. So pretty. Something about the way she said it felt odd. Before I could ask, another relative appeared. Then another, and they kept coming. The introductions blurred together. Names. Faces. Questions. Smiles. Judgment. By the end, I felt like I'd completed 3 job interviews and a psychological evaluation. Then the room suddenly became quiet. Not gradually, instantly. Like somebody pressed pause. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. The reason entered through the main doors. Mrs. Kong. 82 years old. Tiny. Elegant. Terrifying. The family matriarch moved slowly through the room. Not because she was weak. Because powerful people never rush. Everyone watched her. Including me. She approached Ji-hoon first. Then stopped. Her eyes shifted. Toward me. For several seconds, she simply stared. I smiled politely. She didn't smile back. Instead, her eyes widened. The teacup slipped from her hand and shattered across the floor. Nobody moved. Because apparently Mrs. Kong never dropped anything. Ever. Then she whispered a single word. No. Mrs. Kong looked at me as though she'd seen a ghost. Then she started walking toward me, slowly. Her hands trembling. My stomach tightened. She stopped directly in front of me. Close enough to touch. Then her gaze dropped. Not to my face. To the necklace around my neck. The small silver necklace my mother had given me before she died. The necklace I'd worn almost every day for 5 years. Mrs. Kang's hand rose, shaking. Then she touched the pendant and whispered, "Where did you get this?" The room became completely silent. Because somehow, every member of the Kong family already knew the answer mattered. I looked around. Nobody was eating or talking. Half the room looked confused. The other half looked nervous, which was significantly worse. It's my mother's. Mrs. Kang's hand froze. My mother gave it to me before she died. The old woman's eyes immediately filled with tears. Real tears. The kind that appear before people can stop them. Then she whispered, "Impossible." I frowned. "What is?" Before she could answer, another voice cut through the room. "Mother." A man stepped forward. Mid-60s. The kind of face that had spent decades making difficult decisions. Mrs. Kang's eldest son. Ji-hoon's father. Chairman Kong. And judging by his expression, he wasn't happy. Not even slightly. His eyes moved from the necklace to me, then back to the necklace. He seemed shocked. Perhaps we're making the young lady uncomfortable. Mrs. Kong never looked away from me. "Do you know what this necklace is?" I touched the pendant. No. The answer felt inadequate. Because suddenly I wasn't sure. My mother had never explained it. She'd simply given it to me. Told me to keep it safe. And changed the subject whenever I asked questions. The old woman slowly turned the pendant over. The moment she did, a lot of people gasped. Several relatives stood. One woman dropped her fork. I blinked, completely confused. Because all I saw was a symbol. A tiny engraving of a flower. That's it. A flower. What? Nobody answered. Then Ji-hoon stepped closer. His expression had become serious. The playful fake boyfriend version was gone. What does it mean? Mrs. Kong swallowed hard. Then quietly answered. There were only two. She looked directly at me. Only 2 necklaces were ever made. My heartbeat started beating fast again. Because suddenly everyone looked like they were standing inside a memory. A painful one. Then the old woman pointed toward a portrait hanging above the fireplace. I turned and my blood ran cold. The woman in the painting looked exactly like me. Not similar. Not close. Exactly. Even the shape of her face was identical. For a second, I honestly thought I was looking at myself. Then I noticed the clothing. The portrait was old. At least 30 years. Maybe more. The woman couldn't be me. Which meant there was only one possibility. The woman in the portrait was the person Aunt Sun-hee had recognized earlier. The person Mrs. Kong thought she'd seen. The ghost everyone kept reacting to. What is happening? Nobody answered. Apparently nobody in this family enjoyed straightforward communication. Finally Mrs. Kong spoke. Her voice barely above a whisper. Her name was Adiz. My stomach tightened. The name meant nothing to me. The reaction from everyone else suggested it should. Then Ji-hoon quietly asked. The Adiz. Mrs. Kong nodded. The room became silent again. I was beginning to hate silence. Then the old woman looked directly at me and asked the question that changed everything. What was your mother's name? Chinasa Okafor. The second I said it, Mrs. Kong closed her eyes and started crying. She broke right there in front of everyone. And suddenly, I knew my mother hadn't been a stranger to this family. Not even close. The problem was nobody seemed willing to explain why. Mrs. Kong sat down slowly, like her legs had given up. The room remained silent. Finally, I stood. Okay. Every head turned. Good. Because I was running out of patience. I've been fake dating your grandson for approximately 6 hours. Nobody reacted. I flew across the country. Your grandmother cried when she heard my mother's name. Somebody start explaining before I start flipping tables. That got a reaction. A few relatives looked horrified. Ji-hoon looked like he was trying not to laugh, which annoyed me immediately. Mrs. Kong wiped her eyes, then looked at me. And for the first time, I saw something beyond shock. Affection. The kind people have when remembering someone they loved. Your mother saved my son's life. What? Mrs. Kong pointed toward Chairman Kong, Ji-hoon's father. The man who looked like he hadn't smiled since the early 2000s. When he was 21, there was an accident. Nobody interrupted. Then she continued. Adiz and your mother were medical students. I blinked. My mother had never mentioned studying medicine. Then again, she hadn't mentioned Korea either, which was becoming a pattern. Mrs. Kong smiled sadly. Your mother was brilliant. The compliment landed strangely, because she sounded proud. Then Ji-hoon quietly asked, what happened to her? Several relatives looked away. Chairman Kang's jaw tightened. Mrs. Kong looked toward the portrait. For several seconds she said nothing. Then, she disappeared. 3 days before her wedding. Apparently this family specialized in shocking revelations. What? The word escaped before I could stop it. Mrs. Kong nodded. Adiz was engaged. Then she looked directly at Chairman Kong. And for the first time all evening, the powerful businessman looked uncomfortable. My eyes narrowed. Because suddenly, I didn't like where this was going. Not even a little. Then Mrs. Kong quietly delivered the sentence that detonated the room. Adiz was supposed to marry my son. I slowly turned toward Chairman Kong. He looked away, immediately. Which told me everything. Because guilty people never maintain eye contact. Then realization hit. I looked at the portrait. Then at Chairman Kong. Then at Ji-hoon. Then back at the portrait. Because suddenly something else became obvious. The reason everyone kept staring at me. The reason the resemblance disturbed them. The reason Mrs. Kong dropped her teacup. It wasn't just because I looked like Adiz. It was because I looked like the future she never got. The woman who should have become part of this family. The woman who vanished before the wedding. Then a voice spoke from the back of the room. Cold, sharp, female. Or maybe she didn't disappear. Every head turned. A woman stood near the entrance. Elegant. Beautiful. Late 20s. Designer dress. Dangerous smile. The kind of woman who enjoyed creating problems. Her eyes locked onto mine. Then she laughed softly, without humor, and said, "Maybe she ran." The room went silent. The woman smiled. Apparently she enjoyed that. I had no idea who she was. I already disliked her. Mrs. Kang's expression hardened immediately. "Nari." The woman shrugged. "What?" She walked confidently into the room, completely unconcerned about the tension she'd just created. Then she looked directly at me. Not the way everyone else had. Not with shock or curiosity. With suspicion. Which was refreshing, honestly. At least it was honest. "Nari Kang." She offered her hand. I would have introduced myself sooner, but everyone seemed busy having emotional breakdowns. I didn't take the hand. She seemed pleased by that. Interesting. Then she looked at Ji-hoon. "So this is the famous girlfriend." Ji-hoon sighed. "Nari." "What?" "Behave." She laughed. "No." Apparently they had history. Complicated history. The annoying cousin kind. Then Nari turned back to me. "Do you know what nobody is mentioning?" Then Nari pointed toward the portrait. Adiz disappeared 3 days before her wedding. Without taking money. Without contacting family. Without ever being seen again. The room became uncomfortable. Fast. Then Nari folded her arms. And somehow everybody decided she was a victim. My stomach tightened. Because suddenly I understood. Nari didn't believe the family story. Not even slightly. Mrs. Kang's voice sharpened. "Enough." "No." The younger woman didn't back down. Not an inch. 29 years. She looked around the room. 29 years and nobody asks the obvious question. Then she looked directly at Chairman Kong. And fired the missile. "What if she left because she didn't want to marry you?" Several relatives stood. Mrs. Kong looked furious. Chairman Kang's face darkened immediately. And Ji-hoon muttered, "Oh no." Which was not reassuring. Not at all. Nari smiled. The smile of someone who enjoyed chaos. Then something unexpected happened. Chairman Kong laughed humorlessly. Everyone froze. Because apparently he never laughed either. Then he looked at Nari. "No." The answer came quietly. And somehow that was more convincing than anger would have been. Then he looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time. And asked, "Did your mother ever mention a letter?" My heart stopped. Because suddenly, I remembered something. Not clearly. A memory. Tiny. Old. My mother sitting at her desk. A wooden box. A sealed envelope. The words. "Not yet." The memory hit so hard I actually staggered. Ji-hoon immediately caught my arm. "Amara?" The room disappeared. Because suddenly I remembered something else. 5 years ago. 3 days before my mother died. She'd handed me a key. A small brass key. I'd never used it. Never asked about it. Never thought about it again. Until now. My stomach dropped. Because I knew exactly where that key was. Hidden inside a locked box beneath my bed in Seoul. Then Chairman Kong asked the question. The exact question I was already thinking. "Your mother left you something, didn't she?" Every person in the room stared at me. Waiting. And for the first time all weekend, I realized my mother might have known this day would come. Because suddenly, I wasn't at a wedding anymore. I was standing in the middle of a mystery she'd left behind. And whatever answers everyone wanted, they were no longer in Busan. They were in my apartment. The problem? My apartment was 4 hours away. The bigger problem? Apparently nobody intended to wait 4 hours. The moment I mentioned the key, the room changed. And suddenly everybody became interested. Nari noticed it too. Of course she did. She seemed to notice everything. Interesting. Nobody responded. She smiled. Look around. I did. And immediately wished I hadn't. Because she was right. The room wasn't reacting like a family hearing good news. They were reacting like investors hearing about a missing asset. My stomach tightened. Then Nari quietly added, "You're not the only one who wants to know what's in that box." The silence became uncomfortable. Then Chairman Kong stood. "We leave tonight." The decision came instantly. Like it had already been made. I blinked. "What?" "Seoul." He grabbed his jacket. "We'll retrieve the box." I stared at him. "You mean I'll retrieve my box?" That earned the first genuine smile I'd seen from Nari all evening. Ji-hoon looked suspiciously entertained too. Chairman Kong sighed. Apparently he wasn't used to being challenged. "I only meant." "I know what you meant." I folded my arms. "My mother left it to me. So I decide who sees it." Nobody argued. Then Mrs. Kong quietly spoke. She's right. That seemed important. Then she looked at me. And for the first time since we'd met, her expression softened. If Chinasa protected it for all these years, then she intended it for you. Something about those words hit harder than expected. Because suddenly this wasn't about mysteries. Or family secrets. It was about my mother. The woman who raised me. The woman who never explained anything. The woman who apparently explained more than I realized. Then Ji-hoon checked his watch. We should leave. Everyone agreed. Except Nari. Which immediately concerned me. She was leaning against the wall looking thoughtful. Then she asked, "Does anybody find the timing strange?" The room paused. She continued. Amara arrives. Grandmother recognizes the necklace. She discovers Adiz. Then suddenly there's a box. Nobody liked where she was going. Least of all me. Then she looked directly at Chairman Kong. And somehow everyone assumes that's a coincidence. The room became silent. Because unfortunately, she had a point. Chairman Kong glanced at the portrait. Just for a second. Then away. But in that second, I saw fear. The kind powerful people try very hard to hide. And then I knew. Whatever was inside that box. Chairman Kong was hoping it wasn't there. Then a phone rang. Not mine. Not Ji-hoon's. Chairman Kang's. The room went still. He answered. Listened. Said nothing. For 10 seconds, 20, and the color slowly drained from his face. Finally he lowered the phone. Then Mrs. Kong quietly asked, "What happened?" Chairman Kong looked directly at me. Then delivered the last sentence I expected to hear. The apartment was broken into. What? The word came from multiple people. Mine included. Because suddenly, the box wasn't waiting for us anymore. And whoever had entered my apartment knew exactly where to look. The apartment was broken into. Chaos broke out. Everybody talking at once. Everybody except Ji-hoon. He was watching me, not the room. Which was unfortunate. Because I was trying very hard not to panic. The box. The key. My mother's secrets. If somebody broke into my apartment because of them, then whatever was inside wasn't old history. It still mattered. Right now. Then Ji-hoon grabbed my hand. Like he'd done it 1,000 times. Let's go. I blinked. What? Before the entire family decides to come with us. I looked around. Unfortunately, he was right. Several relatives already looked ready to organize a search party. Nari included. Then Mrs. Kong spoke. Take my car. Nobody argued. That told me everything about who really ran the family. 2 hours later, Ji-hoon and I were alone. Finally, no relatives, no wedding guests, no emotional breakdowns. Just a luxury SUV. A dark highway. And a mystery that seemed determined to ruin my weekend. I stared out the window, lost in thought. Then Ji-hoon quietly asked, "Are you okay?" I laughed. The kind unstable people make. My mother secretly knew your family. My apartment was broken into. There's possibly a box containing life-changing secrets. I looked at him. What part sounds okay? To my surprise. He smiled. Fair point. He said. Comfortable silence settled between us. The kind that makes you notice things. Like how good he looked when he wasn't being annoying. Or how nice his voice sounded at night. Or how his hand was still holding mine on the center console. Then he sighed. What? He glanced at me. Then back at the road. Can I tell you something? That sounded suspicious. Probably not. It might make you uncomfortable. Then he laughed softly. I knew this was a bad idea. What is? The fake dating. I frowned. Now. After dragging me to Busan? Yes. I stared. This feels late. It is. Then his expression shifted. The joking disappeared. And suddenly, he looked honest. I stopped pretending 3 days ago. The air left my lungs. Immediately, I looked away. Toward the window, the road. Toward literally anything else. Because there are moments when your brain simply refuses to function. This was one of them. What? Ji-hoon smiled. The kind that made my stomach do strange things. You heard me. Unfortunately, I had. Every word. Then he added. The family doesn't know we're fake. I think I'm the only one who still remembers. My heartbeat became a problem. Because the chemistry I'd spent months pretending not to notice was sitting in the car with us. And it had apparently become self-aware. Then my phone rang. The timing was criminal. I grabbed it immediately. Mostly because I needed oxygen. The screen displayed an unknown number. I answered. Hello. Then a woman's voice spoke. Soft and calm. Amara. Every muscle in my body locked. Because I knew that voice. Not personally, but from somewhere. Then the woman continued. You should have stayed at the wedding. The blood drained from my face. Beside me, Ji-hoon noticed immediately. What? I couldn't answer. Because I recognized the voice. It belonged to Nari. Except it couldn't. Because Nari was still in Busan. At least, she was supposed to be. Then the voice laughed softly. And delivered the sentence that made my heart stop. Your apartment isn't the only place we searched. The call ended. No explanation, no warning. For several seconds I stared at the screen. Then at Ji-hoon. My heart hammering. Because now the problem wasn't the box. The problem was me. Somebody wasn't looking for evidence anymore. They were tracking us. Then Ji-hoon took the phone from my hand. Number. Blocked. His jaw tightened. Not a good sign. Nothing about tonight was a good sign. Then my phone vibrated again. One message. Unknown sender. A photograph. It wasn't my apartment. It was my office. My desk. And sitting on the desk was something I hadn't seen in years. The wooden box. The one I'd assumed was under my bed. The one I'd been protecting without even realizing it. For several seconds I simply stared. Then reality caught up. No. Ji-hoon looked. His expression changed immediately. What is that? My office. The silence inside the SUV became terrifying. The box was never in my apartment. It had been in my office all along. Which explained something. My mother had hidden it somewhere I'd visit every day. Not somewhere I'd forget. Then another message arrived. Only 5 words. Check the false bottom. My pulse exploded. Because there was only one person who could know that. My mother. Except my mother was dead. For 5 years. Then another message arrived. Hurry. They know. The SUV swerved slightly. Not enough to be dangerous. Enough to reveal Ji-hoon was rattled. Then he accelerated fast. The city lights of Seoul appeared ahead. Nobody said a word. 40 minutes later we were inside Kong Holdings. At midnight, the building was almost empty. My heels echoed across the marble floor as we headed toward my department. Every second felt louder, longer. Then we reached my office. The door was open. I never leave my door open, ever. Ji-hoon stepped in front of me instinctively. Protectively. The gesture should have annoyed me. But it didn't. Then we entered. The office looked untouched. People searching for something usually make a mess. Whoever came here knew exactly what they wanted. Everything sat where I'd left it. Organized, normal. Except for the box. The wooden box sat directly in the center. Almost like an invitation. My mother's box. The box she'd protected for nearly 30 years. The box powerful people seemed terrified of. Slowly I approached. My hand started shaking. Then I inserted the small brass key. Click. The lock opened. I lifted the lid. Nari was the first person to recover. Which was unfortunate. Because Nari recovering usually meant trouble for everyone else. She looked from me to the photograph. Then back to me. Well. A pause. That explains the face. Mrs. Kong smacked her arm. Nari rubbed the spot. What? It does. Somehow that broke the tension. Just enough. A few reluctant laughs escaped around the room. Including mine. Which felt strange. Finding out your entire identity is built on a family secret should not be funny. Yet somehow Nari managed it. A true gift. Or a curse. Possibly both. Ji-hoon still hadn't moved away. Not that I was paying attention that much. Okay, I was paying attention. His arm remained around my shoulders. It felt warm. Dangerously distracting also, if I might add. Then I realized something. Everybody was watching us. Every single person, including Mrs. Kong, who looked entirely too pleased with herself. I immediately stepped away. Because I suddenly remembered his entire family was standing there. Unfortunately, Ji-hoon noticed. The tiny smile that appeared on his face made me want to throw something at him. Don't. What? That. What? You know exactly what. His smile got bigger. I hated how attractive that was. Then Chairman Kong cleared his throat. The sound carried the energy of a man who had just discovered his life was significantly more complicated than expected. There's more. Of course there was. Nobody leaves 30 years of secrets in one envelope. That would be considerate. And this story had clearly decided against being considerate. Chairman Kong picked up another letter. His hands weren't quite steady. Interesting. I hadn't realized he cared this much. Then he began reading. If Amara ever learns the truth. The room focused immediately. Tell her I never abandoned her. The words hit harder than expected. Not because of what they said. Because I'd spent my entire life believing I hadn't been abandoned. And now I was discovering a part of me had quietly wondered anyway. Chairman Kong continued. Tell her I loved her from the first moment I held her. Mrs. Kong started crying again. At this point we should have just assigned her a permanent box of tissues. Then came the final line. And tell her Kong Min-suk kept his promise. The room frowned collectively. Except Chairman Kong. He didn't frown. He looked like someone had just punched him emotionally. Then I noticed something. The name wasn't his. He wasn't Kong Min-suk. Ji-hoon noticed too. Who is Min-suk? Nobody answered immediately. Then Mrs. Kong sat down slowly. Like she already knew nobody was going to enjoy the answer. Finally she looked up. He was Ji-hoon's uncle. Then she added. He was also Adi's first love. That felt important. And judging by the expression on Chairman Kang's face, it was about to become very important indeed. I looked at Ji-hoon. He looked at his grandmother. Then at his father. Then back at his grandmother. Nobody ever mentioned an uncle. Mrs. Kong laughed once without humor. That's because your grandfather made sure nobody did. Now everybody was interested, including Nari. Then Mrs. Kong took a long breath. The family wanted your father to inherit the company. She pointed at Chairman Kong. He was responsible, reliable, predictable. Then she smiled sadly. Min-suk was none of those things. That sounded promising. The best kind of family story. Then she continued. Min-suk wanted to be a journalist. The room blinked collectively. A journalist? Inside a billionaire family? That was like becoming a vegan in a barbecue competition. Chairman Kong rubbed his forehead. Apparently he'd heard this story before. Mrs. Kong continued. He spent years exposing corruption. Even when the corruption belonged to powerful friends of the family. Then she pointed at the letters. Adiz met him while investigating a charity fraud scheme. Nari raised a hand. Like we were in class. Just checking. Nobody liked where this was going. Are we saying the rich family rebel and the brilliant Nigerian medical student fell in love while exposing corruption together? Mrs. Kong nodded. Yes. Nari looked around the room. That is annoyingly romantic. I hated that she had a point. Then Ji-hoon quietly asked. What happened to him? This time nobody answered immediately. Not because they didn't know. Because they did. The answer was written all over their faces. Finally Chairman Kong spoke. The car accident. My stomach tightened. Mrs. Kong immediately shook her head. No. Obviously, the family didn't even agree on the official story. Then the old woman looked directly at me. Min-suk never had an accident. Then Mrs. Kong opened a final envelope. One nobody had touched yet. Inside was a newspaper clipping. At the center was a photograph. A young handsome man laughing. The resemblance hit immediately. Not to Chairman Kong. To Ji-hoon. The same smile. The same eyes. The same irritating ability to look attractive without permission. Then I saw the headline. Investigative reporter found dead after exposing financial fraud. My chest tightened. Because suddenly this wasn't a love story. It was a tragedy. Then I noticed something else. Someone had circled a paragraph in red ink. I leaned closer. The article mentioned a whistleblower. A witness. A woman who vanished days before she could testify. The witness's name was Adiz. Then Ji-hoon looked at me. And finally the entire puzzle clicked into place. Adiz didn't run away. She went into hiding. Not for herself. For me. For the child she was carrying. And suddenly my mother's choices made perfect sense. Chinasa hadn't stolen someone else's child. She protected her best friend's daughter. For 28 years. Without ever asking for credit. The realization hit harder than any mystery. Because for the first time since opening the box, I wasn't angry. I wasn't confused. I missed my mother terribly. Ji-hoon saw it immediately. Of course he did. The man had become annoyingly good at reading me. Then he gently took my hand. No speeches. No grand gestures. Just his hand. And somehow that felt better than all of it. Then he leaned closer. Just enough for only me to hear. You know? I looked up. His eyes held mine. Then he smiled softly. Your mother would have been very proud of you. And that was the moment I almost kissed him. Right there. In front of his entire family. Which would have been embarrassing for everyone. Especially me. Then Nari ruined everything. Please kiss already. The room burst into laughter. And for the first time all weekend, the mystery stopped being the most important thing in the room. Unfortunately, the Kong family immediately became the most important thing in the room. Because the moment Nari made her announcement, every relative suddenly developed opinions. Strong, unsolicited opinions. Mrs. Kong looked delighted. Chairman Kong looked exhausted. And Ji-hoon looked entirely too amused. I pointed at Nari. You started this. I finished it. Nobody asked you. Everyone was thinking it. The annoying part? She was probably right. Then Mrs. Kong stood. Immediately, the room settled. Power is fascinating. Some people need microphones. She just needed to stand up. Then she looked directly at me. Amara. The way she said my name felt different now. Warmer. Personal. Then she smiled. The kind that reaches the eyes. I think your mother would be furious with all of us. I smiled because that sounded exactly right. Chinasa had never enjoyed drama. Which was unfortunate. Because she apparently left me enough drama to power a television network. Then Mrs. Kong continued. She protected you. She protected Adiz. And she protected this family. The old woman looked around the room. Then added. We owe her more than we can repay. For the first time all evening, nobody argued. Not even Nari. Unexpectedly, Chairman Kong walked toward me. Like a man approaching a situation he wasn't qualified for. Which, judging by his expression, was exactly how he felt. Then he handed me one final envelope. I never opened it. The handwriting on the front was simple. For my little girl. My vision blurred from tears in seconds. Then I opened the letter. My sweet Amara. If you're reading this, then life ignored every plan I made. I don't know who raised you. I don't know where you grew up. I don't know if you became stubborn like me. Though I suspect you did. I smiled reluctantly. I hope someone loved you loudly. Nobody had ever described my mother better. Chinasa loved loudly. In food. In hugs. In lectures. In phone calls asking if I'd eaten. In showing up uninvited with soup when I was sick. Then I reached the last paragraph. If you ever find this family, forgive them. Most of them are good people. Especially a stubborn little boy named Ji-hoon. I stared. Then looked up. Across the room, Ji-hoon looked equally shocked. Mrs. Kong started laughing. Then she wiped tears from her face. Adiz adored that child. Ji-hoon looked horrified. Which only made everyone laugh harder. Then I returned to the letter. The final sentence sat alone on the page. Trust your heart before your fear. I folded the letter carefully. Then looked up. Straight at Ji-hoon. The man who had driven across the country for me. Stood beside me through every answer. Held me together when I was falling apart. And somehow made fake dating feel more real than anything I'd experienced before. For once in his life. Ji-hoon looked nervous, which was honestly adorable. Then he cleared his throat. Amara. I raised an eyebrow. What? He took a breath. When this started, I needed a fake girlfriend for a wedding. The room immediately went quiet. Not because of mystery. Because everybody knew exactly where this was heading, including me. Then Ji-hoon smiled and quietly asked, would you like to be my real one? For a moment, nobody moved. Then Nari groaned dramatically. Oh, thank God. The entire room started laughing. Even Chairman Kong. The kind that probably deserved documentation. Ji-hoon never took his eyes off me. Unfortunately. Because the longer he looked at me, the harder it became to remember basic things. Like language. And oxygen. Both felt useful. Then Mrs. Kong pointed toward the door. Everybody out. The room blinked. What? Nari asked. Out. But. Nari looked Ji-hoon and I. Then sighed. We're being evicted from our own family drama. Mrs. Kong wasn't moved. 5 minutes later the room was empty. Just me and Ji-hoon. The silence felt different now. Ji-hoon rubbed the back of his neck. You haven't answered. I know. You usually answer immediately. Right. A smile tugged at his mouth. You're enjoying this. A little. That's cruel. It really isn't. Then I stepped closer. Close enough to see the tiny scar near his jaw. Close enough to notice he was holding his breath. That made me feel unexpectedly powerful. I decided I liked it. Then I folded my arms. You know what annoys me most? He frowned. What? You tricked me. His expression became cautious. About what? The handbook. For a second he looked confused. Then realization hit. And he laughed. The fake relationship handbook? Yes. What's wrong with it? I stared at him. You spent 3 weekends creating a fictional love story. Well, you included footnotes. I did. You listed my favorite ice cream flavor. You do like salted caramel. I narrowed my eyes. That isn't the point. It sounds like it though. I tried very hard not to smile. The handbook hadn't been entirely fictional. Because somewhere along the way, Ji-hoon had stopped inventing details. He'd started paying attention. To the real me. The coffee I liked. The books I reread. The songs I pretended not to love. The snacks I bought when stressed. The little things that mattered. The things people only notice when they care. Then I asked the question. The one I'd been wondering for weeks. When did you know? His smile faded. Then he answered honestly. Seoul. I frowned. That narrows it down to an entire city. Then shook his head. The night your apartment building lost power. I remembered immediately. A thunderstorm and blackout. A broken elevator. Takeout food by candlelight. And 6 hours of conversation. My heart immediately betrayed me. Because I'd loved that night too. Then Ji-hoon took one step closer. That was the first time you stopped treating me like your boss. I smiled. You are very difficult to like. That's fair. Sometimes impossible. Also fair. Then his expression softened. And yet, the 2 words settled between us. Then I thought about my mother. About Adiz. About the letter. Trust your heart before your fear. For once in my life, I decided to listen. I grabbed the front of his jacket, pulled him down, and kissed him. Started out sweet, but he gave in to so much, it went deep really fast. 28 years of overthinking had already done enough damage. The kiss lasted exactly long enough for somebody to start clapping outside the room. We broke apart immediately. Mortified. Then Nari's voice came through the door. I knew it. I closed my eyes. Ji-hoon laughed against my forehead. And at that moment, I realized something. The wedding hadn't given him a fake girlfriend. The wedding had given me a family. A history. Answers. And somehow, a future I never saw coming. 3 months later, Mrs. Kong hosted another family gathering. Officially, it was a celebration. Unofficially, it was an excuse to tell everyone she had been right. She mentioned this frequently. Nari started a betting pool predicting our engagement date. Chairman Kong pretended not to participate. Then secretly won. And every Sunday morning, without fail, Mrs. Kong placed fresh flowers beneath 2 photographs. One of Chinasa. One of Adiz. Side by side. Best friends. At last reunited. As for Ji-hoon, the former CEO who needed a fake girlfriend, he never updated the handbook. He framed it. According to him, it was the most important business document he'd ever created, which remains the single most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But again, he got the outcome he wanted. So maybe the man knew exactly what he was doing all along. And if you ask him today how he convinced me to become his girlfriend, he'll tell you it was strategy, planning, timing, preparation. That's a lie. The truth? He got lucky. And unlike his handbook, that explanation only takes 1 page. Hit the subscribe button for more relationship stories.